من ناوم ئینکیە. گیانی دروستکردن و هۆشمەندی و ئەفراندن. هەروەها هی ئاویش، مناڵانی بزەویش.
Welcome to Enki Talk, an environmental podcast by Waterkeepers Iraq under the project Tanjaro River Threat Assessment and Outreach Project, which is funded by European Union and implemented by UNDP. Welcome, Sara Eleonora. I would like you to introduce yourself to our listener.
Thanks, Nabil. I'm really excited about this opportunity and thank you for inviting me to be on the podcast for such an important topic. My name's Sara Eleonora. I'm a psychotherapist. I've been here in Sulaimaniyah for 4 years now, but I'm originally Australian.
Thank you. You have 4 years experience to living in this part of the planet, but you grow up with your beautiful environmentalist activist mom, which is, I'm sure you learned so much from her, and your parents, your families, they care about the planet in general. You as a witness, as the persons, you've been in quite few places in this planet, and you have seen the rapid change when it's come to the environment in general. When you look at our blue, beautiful planet, what do you see? What you are actually witnessing when it's come to the environment in general?
I think what comes to my mind first is just the rapid change. So even we can talk about here in Kurdistan, or we can talk about back in Australia. But the situation with the environment has changed in both places. You know, Australia is now experiencing, I think it's the third La Nina. So for the third year in a row, there's been flooding in some parts of Australia. And then if we flip to Kurdistan, we're experiencing really dry weather, dust storms. You know, I think between April and May we had 8 dust storms. So on the one hand, we're experiencing in both parts of the world more and more extreme weather events as the global temperatures rise and as we start to really feel the effects of climate change.
What are you witnessing? The 4 years experience living in Kurdistan, Iraq, northern Iraq. What have you seen in the last 4 years, and what have you learned when it's come to the global warming and climate change? Of course, drought, for example.
Yeah, the drought is one of the things, but I think the weather is just becoming more and more extreme. So I mentioned the dust storms before. They're in this last year, in 2022, they've been more frequent than they have been in the other 3 years that I've been here. I can see that the nature over this last summer has been really drying out and struggling. And then, of course, you know, we have the problems around pollution, human garbage and waste, and then, of course, industrial waste that continues to be dumped inappropriately into our water sources here and into the environment in general.
You as a therapist, what you are actually witnessing right now and the rapid change happening in this part of the planet, how much this gonna affect our health when it's come to the psychological struggle? For example, like we keep losing river, we keep building dams, human impact, climate change, global warming, and of course fossil fuel and industrial waste. We gone that far. I'm not sure if we can actually, we are in a tipping point, if we can curve it down, or I don't want to say it's too late, but what is your, I know this can be a little bit not very optimistic, but what is your view on that? Like how much psychologically we will be affected health-wise?
I think there's a couple of important things here, you know. During the Paris Agreement in 2015, world leaders agreed that we would try to keep the increase in temperature as close as we could to 1.5 degrees and below 2 degrees. What we're seeing now is the temperature is between 1.5 and 2 degrees, and we're witnessing these rapid changes in our climate. What we're witnessing is the rapid destruction of the environment in the Arctic, melting of glaciers, of ice caps, and sea levels rising. Like recently, we've seen floods in Pakistan, in Nigeria, and in other places, including Australia. So this is what we're seeing with a small increase in temperature. Not a small, but an increase in temperatures within the range that we'd agreed to. Now, when we go beyond that, the climate becomes more unstable, and we're going to witness more destruction and more extreme climate events. The world will not be as it is now, because we are, as you said, we're reaching this tipping point where everything is out of balance. So this is like those are some of the statistics that we have. But then if we think about the impact on humans, we can look at that impact from a number of lenses. One of them is, with increased extreme weather events, people's exposure to traumatic situations and traumatic experiences will be higher. Displacement and migration will be higher. The number of asylum seekers and refugees we see fleeing from these areas will be higher. So we know that. So we know that these extreme events, impact people in terms of trauma. So what we'll see is people with who are experiencing the events and fleeing the events will see a higher outcome of trauma. People will also be more vulnerable as they flee to trafficking, to trying to take dangerous ways to leave places that are no longer sustainable to live in. We'll see an increase in famine and hunger because the food production will be impacted. So this is more on the extreme line, right? So we're likely to see more instances of people experiencing trauma and the effects of trauma, but related to extreme climate events.
What do you, if you don't mind, if you explain to our listeners, what is the extreme event? What do you mean by that? I mean, I know, but I'd like to.
So when we say extreme events, what we're talking about is natural disasters, flooding, fires, droughts, tsunamis, hurricanes. I think in the last weeks we've been hearing about the floods in Pakistan, the floods in Nigeria.
But is we always had a flood, but the events now is different?
The events are becoming more frequent and less predictable.
And it's creating trauma for, we cannot recover easily when we have this kind of, what happened in Haiti a few years ago, 80% of, the town's just gone down, and I don't know, I'm just throwing the number if I'm not accurate, but I remember there was a few hours or few days there was no access to the clean water, for example, and people, they were dying, and we are witnessing that extreme event, actually.
So how we would define trauma is exposure to an event or a situation that's perceived as life-threatening to that individual or overwhelms their ability to cope. So in any of these events, there are overwhelming events, and therefore they will impact somebody's psychological health as well as their physical health. If you don't have access to clean water for a few days, your physical health will suffer. But then managing that and dealing with it will impact your psychological health as well. So, once you have access to clean water, and medication and the other things that you need, you can start to rebuild your physical health, but often, psychological health is not considered, particularly when, I want to say.
So, are we should open more hospital or we should train more, having more psychotherapists and having more doctors or less go to the main problem, which is we've gone too far with our mother nature and restore what we have damaged in the past 50 years or last 100 years. For example, 50% of our marshlands got disappeared in this planet in the last 100 years, which is wetlands, marshlands is one of the most important natural resource for actually filtering our making a really perfect ecosystem for our daily life, and all the creatures live together. So what's your advice to restore and say sorry to the mother nature and to change our individual actions, and we all take actions, or let's open more hospitals for our struggles? And I would like to hear.
I want to take us back a bit because, you know, I was talking about what we would consider extreme events. So that's one element. And when we say extreme events, I want to really like challenge that idea that these events are rare. They're not rare anymore. They're happening more and more often because of the impacts of climate change. Now, this is one end of the scale, and I will get back to your question. This is one end of the scale. The other end of the scale is all of us, day by day, who are living on this planet, are witnessing the day by day changes in our nature. You know, we're witnessing the destruction of places where sorry, edit that part. Yeah, you know, all of us day by day are witnessing the destructions of nature. So we see the places we grew up in being destroyed, you know, more towns being built, more concrete being built. And this is the thing that, you know, I know Waterkeepers Iraq has been working on. We're watching our rivers be filled and destroyed either by damming or by industrial pollution or by human waste. So that's another end. And I think if we only focus on the extreme end, it's easy to discount it and say, oh, these are just some people. But it's really not just some people, it's all of us. We're all witnessing this this destruction, and it affects us, you know. People who care about and feel connected to the environment can feel a type of grief. You know, they grieve the places that they knew the same way that you would a friend or a family member. So now I come back to your question is, what do we do? You know, building more hospitals is like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. It's not going to change anything, right? We have to address the root of the problem. And I think, you know, we need to reduce fossil fuels. We need to find ways to exist more sustainably as humans. But then more importantly, we need to think about our relationship and connection with the environment, you know, and how we interact day by day when we're in places we love and feeling reigniting a connection that we have. You know, inevitably, all human beings are interconnected with the world around us. There's no separating us, and I think that can be one of the first steps to starting to heal our relationship, because how can you harm something that you see as a part of you? You know, and I know there's a lot of First Nations knowledge that talks about this. I wouldn't speak to that knowledge, but yeah, it's something that we've always recognized within ourselves as human, and we have been losing that connection. As we destroy more, we become more disconnected, and it's possible to do more.
What do you mean about First Nations?
Yeah.
Explain that for the viewers.
Oh yeah, so
Yeah. What do you mentioned First Nation? If you could, explain who they are.
yeah, so when I talk about Australia, First Nations people are the people who were, you know, a diverse language and identity group who were living on the land before colonization, occupation, and settlement. So they're considered, you know, the first peoples of Australia.
You wrote some books, and one of the books we are really fascinated by your the script writing, which is fascinating, and for us, we as environmentalists, we like the ending. What do you say about like how much, like for example, upstream tribes or upstream country, they don't really care about their tribes or communities living in downstream, or country living downstream, like for example Turkey doesn't care about Iraqi peoples. So 80% of our waterways coming from the neighbor countries. We've been dealing with this conflicts since we as a human being, we realized, you know, like sharing waters, and water used to connect everybody together, sharing our life together, bringing communities, cultures, languages, religions. But nowadays, do you think water, by reading your books, is really like giving us this kind of like warning. Water's not going to be longer. It's not going to actually save us. No, we're changing the concept of the water. Why the water is here in the first place? So the water used to actually giving life to every creature. No living beings can actually survive without water. So I would like to hear your opinion, like how much conflicts actually will affect, like for example, war over like climate change, and change, like affecting our minds and our psychological struggle. And like for example, like countries in the upstream, like they don't care about like Ethiopia, like for example, how much the dam actually will affect how many nations downstream and causing conflicts, could be civil war, struggles, and of course you mentioned trauma, for example, trauma from natural event. But what about we create trauma, like if we don't stop our wars globally, I'm talking about right now, including the Ukraine, the freshest war we created. If we don't stop all these wars around our planet, we're not going to hear what's going on. We're not going to hear like how many trees we are losing, how many new species every day we are, losing. So I would like to hear your opinion. Like, okay, going back to your books, like from that, reading the books, and this is really tough on human.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because there was a lot in what you said. I'm going to try and break it down a little bit. Resources, including water and other environmental resources, have been used as a weapon of war for a long time. If you look back through our history, during colonization, natural resources were used and abused to harm, native populations from the countries that were occupied. It was part of a strategy of genocide during those times. And, me saying that may be controversial for some people, but we need to say the thing, we need to talk about things as they are. So it's not like this is a new thing. This is an old strategy that's been used. Now we're getting smarter at using it. So, you mentioned a few examples, and I think there's when humans come from a scarcity mindset, and they come from a hoarding mindset, and when they come from a greed mindset, then the instinct of those humans will be to keep everything for themselves. It doesn't matter whether we talk about nations, it doesn't matter whether we talk about families, it doesn't matter whether we talk about individuals. But if I am afraid that there won't be enough water for me, then I hoard it, I keep it, I dam it. The dams are not, and I'm sure you've spoken about this with others as well, dams are not a solution to the problem, they're a temporary solution.
Well, the scale of the size of the dams in these days, we've been building dams, since we obviously, long line of where we came from. Environmentally friendly dam was okay, but we're going to the point now, the huge dam, like giants dams, we describe it like a blood clot. I would like to hear your opinion about those dams. When I talked about the dams, like huge dams, how much is actually causing, not just the dam, I mean, it's destroying, like fracking, for example, like
Right.
taking advantage of natural resources just for like greedy.
Well, Nabil,
Rich.
everything is about a balance, right? Like if you have, yes, dams have been built for a long time. Humans, as long as humans have existed, we've changed the environments around us. It's a human thing, and it's not only humans; it's all creatures impact and change the environment around us. Now, it's what is the impact? Now, dams have been used for thousands and thousands of years to support people to have access to water, to have access to hunting, to have access to fishing. But when we talk about these dams that are being built now, they're not. The balance is out.
They're not friendly.
Right. The balance is out. It's maybe we could say the word abuse of nature.
Absolutely.
Taking all the resources for ourselves and not sharing any with others and other creatures. That's not in balance anymore. We've lost that connection.
And it's destroying our communities, like from we for example, the water connect everybody together, but when you build dams, actually it's disconnecting all the communities, languages, and religions. Basically, we destroy the harmony how we used to live in a beautiful, environmentally friendly lifestyle. But these days, that's what's worrying me. Witnessing 75,000 large dam. We're talking about large dam, which is I describe them like blood clot in our blood circulation. And I would like to ask you, where would you, like, I know you do go to nature, you grow up with the beautiful landscapes and woods and trees and wildlife. Like you as a therapist, I heard once from you how the latest actually professional therapists, they take their client to the deep, for example, nature, like water. You take them with a little boat, you go to the quiet place, you jump on a paddleboard, you sit one-to-one with your client. Why do you do that? I mean, why therapists they using this technique now? How much that help?
Yeah, I think what we can, there's therapies that are emerging that are more. I think I have the term correct here, but ecotherapy. So it's more about using nature as a restorative place. Now, we can look at this in different ways. We can say, oh, yes, it's lovely to go out to nature and sit like we're sitting and look at a view and speak with someone that you trust about the things that are bothering you. That this is one thing. But then also, like, when are we going out to nature and repairing our relationship with nature? When we sit with ourselves or when we sit with our clients in nature, how much of that therapy is focused on, okay, we need to repair this connection. And when we're better connected with the world around us, then we will feel better within ourselves. And this is one of the steps, that we can take with people who are.
So nature's a solution, basically, in general.
I wouldn't
water,
put it as a solution, because then that seems
part of the solution.
it seems so open to abuse and mistreatment, right? Like, and I don't think this should be something that's commercialized. I think all of us should be repairing our relationships with nature.
Yeah.
I also a therapist who's specialized in this could guide you through how to reconnect and also reflect on yourself and how you're living your life and how you can live a life more in balance with the world around you. Yes, that's there. But I also think when we all become separated from the world around us, then we also create a grief within us, a sadness, because we're not with our world that we rely on and that we live on. If you're spending your life in a city that's disconnected, if you're overusing fossil fuels yourself, and I also think that it's not only individuals, it's also companies and organizations that are taking advantage of the environment. They need to be held accountable as organizations, but I'm talking on an individual level here.
You as a therapist, you have seen a lot of conflicts in around the world, and you've been in a few countries treating actually people like asylum seekers, people being locked in a camp, and different countries treating. They have a different systems the way they treat refugees, asylum seekers. Do you think, of course, you have witnessed a lot of refugees that run away from their homelands, their motherlands, to somewhere else? It doesn't matter where it is because they run away from the war. But you are witnessing something different. I feel I would like to you, if you add something on that, like how much people, like, for example, recently we had like say 1 year ago, a lot of people, they were starting leaving this country where we actually witnessing in Kurdistan area, like they have seen a lot of farmers in Belarus and between Poland and Belarus, Kurdish farmers. And do you think we are actually right now, like, we causing more trouble? Never mind, we have all this war, and but now we have a different kind of like we create more refugees through even worse than war, which is the climate change and droughts, and we don't share the water equally.
Yeah, I wouldn't make a comparison between better or worse, and people who are seeking asylum or who are migrating or who are refugees are leaving for a reason. They're not leaving for no reason. What I think, and I think what we're starting to see is more and more people moving because of the destruction of the climate. Many areas of our world will not be inhabitable anymore. As the sea levels rise, low-lying cities will be covered by water. If we go beyond the 2 degrees rate, what we're looking at is we're not going to recognize the Earth anymore because it will be so different. Cities in low-lying areas that are already vulnerable to floods will be submerged. People from those cities will need somewhere to go. I had a statistic here. I want to look for my statistic. Sorry, no. So yeah, when we have this, if we have a radical change in the water levels, we have 1 billion people living in low coastal zones, less than 10 meters above the sea level. Now, this includes cities like Bangkok, New York, Shanghai, London, Calcutta, and Sydney.
I heard Basra as well.
Yeah.
Basra will be underwater
Right.
at some point. And
so then, if and when the sea rises, with 1 billion people are living on land less than 2 meters above the sea level. So, if the water level rises, where are those 2 billion people going to go? They need to go somewhere. So what we'll see is people moving from coastal areas towards more inland areas, and we're not looking at we're looking at billions of people. This is not a small number. So I think when we talk about migration and refugee issues, we're looking at a catastrophe on our hands. Now, what we see, so if we look at refugees or asylum seekers who are fleeing persecution and other situations, war included, is that they're on their journeys away, they're vulnerable to things like trafficking, organ harvesting, exploitation. When they arrive in different areas, they're subject to detention, imprisonment, torture. Now, this is as of now. What happens when there's 1 billion people, more than 1 billion people on the move? This means that the number of vulnerable people moving between countries, between cities, it grows exponentially. So yeah, there's a great chance of further abuse to be happening for these people. There's a great chance for poverty to be rising. And none of us are, it doesn't matter which country we live in, none of us are excluded from this. It could be any of us.
I always say I've been witnessing so many different wars since I was born, but what I see, what is the really most scariest things I'm dealing with right now, seeing rapidly, river get disappeared and the pollution, the human impacts, and okay, forget about that. I mean, for now, all this urban waste, industrial waste, we dumping everything to the water and to the nature without we thinking about how nature is gonna react. Like what we had to deal with, like last year we had a cholera, and we had a corona, and we will have
COVID.
corona and COVID-19, and we keep if we continue like this, what is worrying me, we have to be witness to our children, to our new generation. And plus, I would like to ask you, what do you think about the civil society, like activists like us, for example? We dedicate our times and our life to this subject and this crisis we are dealing with. What is your advice? How do you see us? Are we going to go down with suicide or depressions? Because sometimes I feel giving up is not a solution. Continuing, but it does sometimes I feel like paralyzed, I'm so depressed about what I'm dealing with. But what is your opinion on that? Do you advise people to come along and be more activist or be witness and being honest?
I think climate activism is growing more and more and exponentially, because it's necessary. All of us should be activists.
So we
for
need
this.
more.
Yeah, that we need. All of us need to be acting. All of us need to be, lobbying our governments when we can. And I know that's not possible for everybody. Raising awareness, speaking about the changes, working to contain mining companies, fracking companies, those companies who are really exploiting gaps in law, companies who also may exploit situations of war where they can more easily access resources. So yeah, I think we should all be activists. But then, for those of us who are activists, we also need to take care of our mental health. It's not that it's not something that you can neglect. I would say, and I know from speaking with a lot of people, like when the crisis is so big, there can be a push and an energy, and it can be hard to think about yourself because you're only one piece in this huge system. At the same time, if we're not if we're not a healthy piece, if we're not a balanced piece, then the activism suffers for that. Having a group of burnt out activists is we lose the expertise, we lose the skill, we lose people when that happens. So we also, as activists, need to be caring for and looking after ourselves, looking after our mental health, managing our stress. And that's not to put the burden on the individual. I think as activists have support systems among them. We support each other, we keep each other going, and we stay to our values.
I really like what you just said. We can still keep our profession, like you are a banker, or you are an accountant, or you are admin, or you are for example, like even self-employed. But I mean, just to give, I would like to give an example to our listener. Like you are a therapist. You are really doing something really different to environments, and you have clients and patient, but you took the opportunity of your skill, your writings. You wrote about something which is so important right nowadays, and your poetry, your poem, is really beautiful. You like, this is your individual action. Like, what we're trying to say in here to our listeners is time to everybody to keep your profession, but you could take little individual action in a different ways and be part of this movement. Everybody should be aware of what's happening right now, because we're going really too far with buying, destroying, throw, and buy again.
Yeah, and sorry, can I?
Yeah, of course.
And I think, like, when people think of activism, sometimes there's a stereotype in their head, like activists are going to the protests, and they're always, like, protest as activism is one type of activism. There are so many other things you could do.
Well,
like,
we create think tank for the system, and
you can write. You can, write to your local government. You can vote for people who will put better climate policy in place.
Exactly.
You can be there as a helper and a support. You can, there are so many avenues that you can take as activism. I think we need to, sometimes we need to shift that stereotype and include all those people who are taking steps to better our relationship with the environment. Yes, protest if you can, and I understand not everybody has the privilege to protest. Yes,
but we all have a right to stand up for
we have our rights, yes.
Otherwise, we're going to lose. We cannot be here without. We all connected to the bees, reptiles, sea creatures. So
and and we should be angry about this, all of us. And it's not about. It's also not only about throwing around blame. It's about being accountable.
To express your anger, do you think is helping our mental states?
You can express it in a way that's healthy.
No violence.
I'm on the no violence path, but when I say no violence, I don't mean no protest.
So, do you think protests will help us to, like, for some racist country or dictatorship systems, like, give example of like Turkey, Iran, some other countries around the world? They don't care about actually, okay, this water passing by your house or your countries. That doesn't mean you are actually owning this water. This is every single individual in this planet they have a right to have access to the clean water. Because
So I think, protest does change things. I'm not going to sit. I also think that for each country, there are laws and considerations you need to take. I'm not saying just ignore it, but what I'm also saying is how can you use your voice creatively? The school strikes over the years have shown, that this is an issue that's important for the coming generations after us. There are the Extinction Rebellion, who are, a grassroots organization who protest through art, I would say. Maybe I'm not representing that well, but, there will be at politicians' office, they'll be on the street, they'll be dressed in a striking way so that they raise awareness, There's protest through writing. I think that each person knows their own situation and they know what actions that they can take that would be most likely to make a difference. For me, the way that I take action is through my writing. It's also through, supporting politicians and supporting political parties back home in Australia who I believe will make a difference. As best as I can. That's a privileged option. I have that option because I'm Australian. Not everyone has the same option. So look at what you have, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. If all of us really want to stop this, we can. It's just not enough people are standing up.
What is your advice for those people? They can make change. They have clear access to make a change, and they have a power in the system, which is they can make a change. You gave us a lot of advice, for individual activism, which is great, beautiful. But what is your advice on that? And that would be my last question for you.
I think when I think about this, what comes to my mind is we need to weight this. There are countries whose governments have more influence over climate change and more power at this point to be able to take cohesive action. There are countries that have benefited and grown because they've exploited resources from other countries. Now, I talked earlier about colonization. I talked about the exploitation of resources, and I don't think that's ended. I think it's an ongoing issue. So I feel like the weight of the responsibility needs to be on those countries that are using a disproportionate amount of resources, that are exploiting other countries, and I think the citizens from those countries really need to stand up. I don't want to put the burden of action on those people who are living in dire conditions already. I think we all do what we can, and we weight it with our power. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I can see your dogs running around us, and
Whose dog is it?
yeah, and what? It's her dog. She's gonna go to England.
Keep that in the podcast.
I can see your dogs running around us, and she has been part of this podcast, and we couldn't tell her go away because she's part of your life. Mm-hmm. How much? Yeah, tell us who's Rue.
Rue is the dog that has chosen to spend her time with me. She's a rescue dog, sort of. She came from a farm. She came from a farm, and I've had her since she was 6 months old. So she provides me with enough energy and motivation to be out in nature more often because she so loves it. As you can see, she's been running around. But then also, I think I hope that through the way that I am with Rue, that we can be an example for people who mistreat animals, because that happens a lot, unfortunately. And I think if we can show love and respect and care for any animal in our life. Like a dog is she's a dog, so she's a common pet for humans. But if I can even show as much empathy and respect for a spider walking along the ground as I show for Rue, then I am.
I was going to ask you that. Is a Rue, be honest, she's helping or she's adding more stress into your life?
She's helping.
Okay. So without all this living being around us and we're all connected, isn't it?
We are all connected. And I think if people exploit animals and if people harm animals, they're harming a part of themselves. They're not harming something outside of them.
There's a famous quote, Ricky Gervais saying, if you don't have respect and manner for animal, you wouldn't never ever have it for human, for example. And I think it's beautiful the way you just described it, like, of course, having even small plant in the house need treatment, and sometimes you have to sing even for them, and
take that out.
Yeah.
No, but I think if you talk about plants, then I think well, how are we interacting with the plants in our life? I think everyone can, those of us who have the luxury of having a garden can look to the native species from our area, plant those plants that belong in that area, maybe plant the plants that are at risk in the environment because of destruction of other things, and use your garden as a way to provide environment and habitat for bees, for butterflies, for insects. Grow your own food. It doesn't, a garden is not a separate thing from us. It's with us. We feed it, it feeds us.
Thank you for our listener, and thank you for Sara Eleonora having your time and having you here in Enki Talk.
It's a luxury to be here.
Lovely to have you. Thank you so much.
That was a very manly handshake.